For any of you who've been following the show since it started about almost 2 years ago now, you know that I was a very big advocate for a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party, where progressives and lefties, social democrats, democratic socialists, outright socialists, communists, whatever, the real left in this country, primarying all the corporate Democrats, all the establishment Democrats that are against Medicare for all, a living wage, debt-free public college, ending the wars, all those left priorities. Over the last few months, my view on that has changed drastically, and I'm very much convinced now that this idea of a left-wing takeover of the Democratic Party is a fool's errand. There are a lot of things that led me to this position. For one, the fact that it's just been proven time and time again that the leadership of the Democratic Party has no qualms with just outright rigging primary elections so that their favorite candidate wins. The corporate candidate, the establishment-backed candidate, can beat out the progressive that the people would like to represent them. Also, the fact that when we do get these quote lefties, elected progressives into Congress or into the Senate, they don't really challenge the Democratic Party. They are very much go along to get along, and they aren't much of an opposition when they're there. And also just the wanton corruption and flagrant disregard for the American people that the Democratic Party shows time and time again through their horrific policies. No matter how catastrophic the crisis or situation is in the United States, the Democrats have proven over and over again throughout the years, and definitely over the last few months, that will not stop them from actively working against the American people, making the situation worse for the American people if that's what their donors want. If that's what best serves their corporate donors, the billionaires and the billionaires, who they work for. So all of that and some, like I said, led me to believe that this whole hostile takeover of the Democratic Party is a fool's errand, because the party is beyond redemption at this point. So in my view, the way I see it, if we want policy solutions to the immediate crises that are going on in this country right now, if we want UBI to get to the over 50 million people, maybe 60 million people in this country who have lost their jobs, who have lost their incomes, who filed for unemployment, and now the unemployment extension has expired, all those people who are now without income, if you want to support them, you want to get them UBI, only way that's happening anytime soon is in the streets. It's through protests, it's through general strikes, it's through organized civil disobedience and public pressure campaigns to force politicians to enact that policy. The same with Medicare for all. Over maybe 100 million people in this country right now, a third of this country either has absolutely no insurance or they're underinsured, meaning they can't, if they do get sick, if they do need medical attention, they can't afford to go to the doctor or wherever and pay for it. That is untenable, that is unsustainable, and it's an existential crisis to all those people in that situation. If we want Medicare for all, if you want single payer, you're not getting that from the Democratic Party, definitely not getting it from the Republicans. The only way we're getting that is, I guess, the same way with the UBI. Organized protests, general strikes, civil disobedience, and public pressure campaigns. Only way we're getting that anytime soon. But beyond the immediate problems that need to be fixed and policies that need to be implemented, yes, at some point, electoral politics is going to have to play a role again, because I don't think it's productive or even feasible to have massive protests anytime we need any policy change to benefit the people. So that's when electoral politics will be important later down the road. We're going to need people who aren't corrupt and who actually represent and will fight for the people to control the levers of government. And when we get to that point, I don't think it should be another attempt to try to take over the Democratic Party. I think it should be a third party that the left and regular working class people in this country get behind in order to throw the bums out of Congress. Unfortunately, most people in left new media do not share my view on this. In fact, Krystal and Kyle Kulinski, some of the better new media hosts, definitely of the more popular hosts, weighed in on the third party versus take over the Democratic Party debate. And honestly, I think their position is fairly weak and flimsy, and it doesn't seem very much thought through. So I'm going to start with a clip from Kyle's show where he talks about it, and then I'm going to come back and break it down.
You know, I take a lot of crap because I've told people basically the only way we have any chance of winning power is to use one of the two dominant political parties. Like, I get shit because I say, like, listen, as much as I love people trying to start a third party, the system is just totally biased against a third party. You're making your life harder. You will not get power.
So the clip's longer, and I'm going to get to that in a second, where he justifies his position of trying to take over the Democratic Party. But first, let's address this, because this really did get under my skin. It's just the ease at which he dismisses the idea of a third party, and his reason for doing it is, quote, the system is totally biased against a third party, and you're making your life harder. All right, first of all, literally the same exact thing can be said about the takeover of the Democratic Party. The system is biased against anti-corrupted politicians, left-wing people fighting for left-wing policies. The system is biased against them, and it will take a tremendous amount of effort to overcome that in elections. And we've seen this. When back in 2016, the entire DNC, the White House, Hillary Clinton campaign, the media, they were all conspiring to rig the primary against Bernie Sanders. What do you call that? The system being rigged against anti-corrupted politicians. So it's not like you can make an argument that it might be even more rigged against a third party candidate, but I don't even agree with that. I think a more accurate analysis would be it's rigged against a third party. It's rigged against people who try to primary corrupt politicians in the Democratic Party. It's just rigged in different ways for either of those things. So the idea that, oh, we can never do a third party because, quote, it's hard and the system's rigged against it, it's just a flimsy argument. Like I said, you could make it against a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. So here's the rest of the clip from Kyle.
I take shit for that. But what you need to understand is the nuance and the exact strategy of doing a takeover of the party. I've been clear from day one. This is a hostile takeover. I'm not talking about getting in there and then we get watered down and beaten back by the system. And we bend the knee a little and then a little bit more. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we get in there and we let everybody know. I'm not here to make friends. I hate all the Republican leadership. I also hate the Democratic leadership. And they want to snub me by not giving me a committee assignment? Okay, then I'll call that out too. And I'll fire up my people who's, I rode in here on a wave of their support. I'm going to keep them fired up. I'm going to keep them on my side. I'm going to keep them fighting for the right things. I will leverage that pressure. So if they try to screw me because I simply disagree with them, okay, then the world's going to know about it. And guess who's going to come out of that fight on top politically? I am. Yeah, I might be a freshman congressman. Who cares? Who cares? Know your place. No, the way this system works is I represent the people. I don't give a shit about your hierarchy from within the kingdom, within the castle. This ain't a meritocracy. They rose to the top by being the most corrupt. You think I respect that? I don't respect that. So we need to win with a hostile takeover. You take over one of the two major parties, because we have a two-party system and it's biased against the third parties. You could try the third party thing. It's not going to work. If anything is going to work, it's taking over one of the two major parties, for sure. Now, that's hard too, but it does have an actual prayer of working. But the way you do it is standing up to them, calling them out, not taking the crumbs that they give you.
All right, so I feel like this is where the bulk of the disagreement comes from. Kyle's version of a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party, very similar to what I wanted a couple years ago, even just a few months ago. The problem is, the vision that you have in your head of what a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party should look like is not what's actually happening. What's in your head is just a fantasy. You would like all these left-wing, uncorrupted politicians that get elected with the help of groups like Justice Democrats and Our Revolution and Brand New Congress or whatever. You would like them to get elected, become part of the Democratic Party, and like he says, you're there to, quote, make enemies, not make friends. That would be nice, but that's not what actually happens. In fact, every single time we get one of these, quote, progressives elected, lefties elected, they 100% do the opposite, and they try to make friends with the Democratic Party. They try to play the inside game. And the wild part is, Kyle even acknowledges this is what happens. He acknowledges that all the Justice Democrats in Congress aren't fighting for you. He acknowledges that Bernie Sanders is no longer fighting for us. When the CARES Act passed, the corporate heist, the corporate scam that it was, and all the elected progressives went along with it, Kyle came out very strongly and very clearly and said, so what we now know is, at best, this group of lefties and progressives in Congress are ineffective and terrible at strategy and can't get anything done. Or at worst, they just gave up, they bent the knee, and they aren't going to challenge Democratic leadership, and they're just going to go along with whatever it is they tell them to do. Kyle acknowledges this. So I don't get the disconnect here when it comes to his strategy that we should just continue to keep pushing with this quote hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. If he realizes that the people who are there right now through this quote hostile takeover of the Democratic Party aren't actually fighting the Democratic Party. His top priority, his main strategy right now is telling people, oh, go elect some more electives, go elect some more progressives so that they can stand up to the Democratic Party, even though they have a 0% record of actually standing up to the Democratic Party. To me, it's equivalent to before the whole Justice Democrats and this whole hostile takeover of the Democratic Party movement started. It's equivalent to voting for corporate Democrats who take money from the private health insurance companies, who take money from big pharma, and expecting that at some point they're going to see the light, and at some point they're going to actually fight for the American people, and they're going to fight for Medicare for all, even though there is a 0% record of anybody who takes private money from the private health insurance companies and big pharma actually fighting for Medicare for all. It's just not going to happen. It's a fantasy. It's like a fool's errand. And you can keep doing it, keep voting for the Democrats till you're blue in the face and hoping that they're going to support Medicare for all. But the fact that they take money from the private health insurance companies and big pharma, it's basically already decided. They're just not going to do it. And the same with voting for Justice Democrats. You can vote for them till you're blue in the face, but out of all these elected progressives, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders, all of these are elected progressives, right? You would count them towards the quote hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. But the crazy part is 0% of them, none of them would ever actually stand up to the Democratic Party. So how hostile is this takeover of the Democratic Party? It seems like you're just shoving more people, more politicians into this pipeline of becoming regular old useless establishment Democrats. So honestly, I don't know if he's being obtuse on purpose, and I really don't think that's what it is. I think he's just there is this disconnect in his head. But if he was being honest, if he was being confronted with this argument that I'm making, he'd have to admit that this takeover of the Democratic Party has failed. None of these, you can count them as, oh, it's a win that we have people saying they like Medicare for all or not taking corporate money. It's a win for this hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. But like you said, that's not what you consider a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. You consider it to be a forceful rebuke of Democratic leadership and fighting for the people. None of these Democrats are doing it. None of the Justice Democrats are doing it. They're just going along like any regular Democrat. So now Krystal, Ball, and Sagar and Jetty were asked by a member of the audience about what they think about a third party. And so here's the clip, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Do you guys believe a third party will ever emerge that can compete with the Republicans and the Democrats? All right, this is a subject of a lot of hot debate, especially on the left. And I tend to be of the view that the better approach is to take over. The more likely and practical approach is to take over one of the major parties, which we have seen done effectively in recent history, which Trump sort of did and then ended up just being co-opted by the same old Republican forces, but that path was available to him as well.
But it showed it could be done.
It showed it could be done. Bill Clinton did it to the Democrats in a really terrible way back in the 90s. The Tea Party sort of did something similar with Republicans, kind of. But anyway, there's more models there than actually having a third party come into being and be a real competitors because of the structure of the way our electoral system.
It's about the structure. It's always easier. Look, the whole thesis of the show right now is that both parties are not serving the needs, interests, wants of the majority of the American people. So turn your party into the vehicle which does that. And people should really understand, what does it actually take to kill a party and then make the reemergence of another one? The last time it actually happened was the destruction of the Whig Party and the emergence of the Republican Party in the 1860 election. It took slavery. It actually took an issue as divisive as slavery in order to say, no, this Democrat Whig thing doesn't work.
All right, so I'm going to start with Krystal. Her reason for supporting this takeover of the Democratic Party is she gives some examples of people who've taken over or groups that have taken over their party, and in some cases just going against the leadership or opposing the leadership to do so. And are there some lessons you can learn from the examples that she gives? Yeah, but those things aren't analogous with a progressive populist takeover of the Democratic Party. The examples she gives are really right-wingers making their party, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, more right-wing. So it's not like a complete fundamental shift from where the party was going already. It's just they accelerated or adopted more extreme versions of the policies that they already support. She talks about Trump and his takeover of the Republican Party. That's not the same as people who want Medicare for all trying to take over the Democratic Party. Because with Trump, the opposition that the leadership with his party, the opposition that the leadership in the Republican Party had to Trump, and still to this day, some of them have with him, is just his style, the way he carries himself, the way he talks, and the name calling, and not being polite to politicians in the media. So, and then, but on the policy, he's much in line with the Republican Party because he doesn't really care about policy. And as he came into the White House, he let them run roughshod. He let them run the show. So it's not like I said, it's not the same as populists trying to take over the Democratic Party. It's not fundamentally against everything that the Republican Party stands for. And that's why he has like a 90% approval rating within the party. They fucking love him. So I don't think that's a great example of why we should do a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party is more effective than a third party movement. And then she gives examples of Bill Clinton, which I don't even know where she was getting at, because like I said, the Democratic Party, it was in the direction of moving more corporatist, more right wing, and against the populist base of the party anyway. So when Bill Clinton took control of the Democratic Party, he accelerated that within the elected politicians in the Democratic Party. It's not like they were all for Medicare for all and then Bill Clinton got elected and they all switched and became corporatist tools for the private health insurance company. And then Saga's point was just completely ridiculous and lacking all context of what's happening right now in this country. He says the last time it takes a major defining moment in the country for a major party to die off and for an emergence of a new party to happen. And the example he gives is when the Republican Party replaced the Whig Party back in the 1860s over slavery. And then he says that we just don't have an issue as big or as divisive as slavery right now. Excuse me? The fucking global pandemic ripping through the country? The unprecedented economic crisis? 50 million, 60 million people with absolutely no income, 30 million people facing eviction by October? We are in a period of instability that we have never seen in this country, at least since the Civil War. Honestly, I think it's going to be even more chaotic and more defining than the Civil War was. As crazy as that sounds. So this is the moment for that. If there ever was a time for everybody to throw their hands up and say, you know what? These parties are beyond redemption. They are incapable of representing the American people. They're incapable of putting their constituents above their corporate donors and the billionaires. They refuse to do it. Like I said, the CARES Act, they made the situation worse. They are actively working against the American people because that's what's in the best interest of their donors. This is the moment. If there was ever a time for people to finally say, you know what, we can't do this anymore. We have to try something else. We have to go with a third party. It would be now. So Saga's point right there, it's completely off base and has no merit. We are living in uncharted territory right now. So the idea, we just haven't had any third parties recently, so it can never happen. I just think that's ridiculous. So, and this is why I'm very big on the idea of having these heated debates over important issues on the left, definitely among new media hosts, because they have these ideas, they form these ideas in their head, and it sounds convincing to them, and it sounds reasonable to them. But if nobody pushes back on it and points out how it's kind of ridiculous and how all the facts point in the opposite direction, they'll just continue it and they'll repeat it to their audience, and a bunch of people in the audience are gonna buy into it, and they'll repeat it. And so people talk about, the left can't ever agree on anything. The left, there's always so much disagreement on the left. We can never agree on anything, on strategy or anything like that. I think part of that is because new media hosts refuse to have debates on issues where they disagree. So let me know what you guys think about this whole third party versus take over the Democratic Party debate in the comment section, and I would love to read it.